What's up, Prop Mob? Eduardo Talbert here with Monster Tutorials. Today we have a super cool tutorial and we are going to make realistic eyeballs like you saw in the intro. So that's today's project. These are nice and realistic. So let's get started. My second video ever was actually supposedly realistic eyeballs, and they were made with these ping pong balls, right, that I found. These are very hard to find. These were from a game that my kids had, right? Now 5 years have gone by. I want to take the eyeballs realistic, the realism 10 notches, right? So that's what we're doing today. Now this right here is an eyeball that was sent to me by one of the friends of the channel. His name is Don. He made these. And these are made just like the prosthetic eyeballs are made, which is like this level, way up here, right? So these ping pong balls are down here. These are here. So I want to aim somewhere here and make something somewhat realistic, but not as complicated. This requires a lathe and a bunch of other specialized tools. The ones we're making today are these. Right? So they are pretty realistic. I think they're awesome looking and they're not as complicated. Still a lot of steps, so it's not a difficult project, but it has a ton of steps. So let's get started. Now these are slightly smaller than a regular eyeball. So an eyeball is, I think, 24, 25 millimeters. This is about 20 millimeters, so it's a little bit smaller. That way your props don't end up with this huge bug eyes, right? Or with like ping pong balls, which are even bigger. So that's the size we're going to make. Now, how did I decide on this side? Because I try to find the easiest way to do it. And that was going to the dollar store and getting some of these. These are bouncy balls. So I went to the dollar store and they didn't have them on the shelves, but then they had one of those machines, the coin operated machines at the entrance. And one of them had bouncy balls. So I spent $1, so a quarter each. And I bought 4 of them, right? And the idea was to try to find like real smooth ones, because this is going to be the mold. The main, not the mold, but the thing we're going to be molding to make the eyeball. So we're going to start with bouncy balls. So the first step is we're going to take one of these, and we're going to take some sandpaper, and we are going to sand a flat spot on it. So let's start sanding these. Try to hold it steady so that your flat spot is perfectly flat. See the spot right there? Turn it sideways so you can see how flat it is. There you go. That's nice and flat. Right? Excellent. Perfect. Set that aside. I'm using one of these cheap IKEA cutting boards. That's my base of my mold. Now for the molding material, here's the theory behind this. I'm using Alumilite products today. Okay, it's not a sponsored video, but I'll tell you why I'm using these guys, right? 3 reasons. One, is instant gratification. I go to the craft store, which is Michael's or Hobby Lobby, and then they have it. So I can go to the store today and be making eyes tonight, right? So that's the reason number 1 that I have chosen these products. Number 2, if you've seen some of the companies like Smooth On or Break in the Yard or some of the other places, they have a selection of like 50 different silicones, 50 different resins, 30 different clear resins, all kinds of hardnesses and different specs, right? Which for a new person like me or like you, it might be a little overwhelming. Well, when you go to Hobby Lobby or Michael's, they only have 1 silicone, 1 white resin, and 1 clear resin. So no guesswork. That's reason number 2. And reason number 3, which some people will argue with me, is price, okay? So that was 24 bucks. I think this was 20 and this was 20, right? So still expensive. By the ounce, this is way more expensive than buying from the specialty houses, right? So by the ounce here, we're spending a lot more money. But out of pocket, I spend 20 to do my eyes. And if I don't like this, I don't have the commitment of buying like a whole gallon for like 90 bucks. Now, if you buy a gallon for 90 bucks, yes, that'll be cheaper by the ounce, but you still spend 90. Now for the same 60 $4, I got all 3 things, right? So that's the price of like 1 gallon kit in some of the other places, which I will buy in the future as I get better at this, but this is like my trial. So that's the third reason. If you want to support the channel, I've added affiliate links where you can get these below, and if you buy it from there, it doesn't cost you anymore, but it helps the channel. Otherwise, just you don't have to use those links. Just run to Hobby Lobby, run to Michael's, or to whatever your hobby store is, and get yourself some of this stuff. So for the first mold, we're going to use their silicone. This is called Amazing Mold Rubber, right? High strength liquid mold making rubber. So we're going to make a mold of the eyeball. Now I have tested this before. This silicone does not adhere to the material of bouncy balls. This is already flattened, so that part will go down, and on top we need to have a spout or a sprue where the resin gets poured in, right? So taking the cap out of this pen, I'm going to cut about that much. There you go. I'm just going to glue this right on top of the ball. Let that dry. Now for the mold, I'm going to use one of these little shot glasses. They have these at the dollar store. I'm just going to cut the bottom off. All right, so I cut the bottom off, right? And that is going to be the mold wall around this guy. This seems to be kind of solid. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to glue it to the ground here, to this mat. Right, let that get set all the way. The next thing I'm going to do is very carefully set that over it in the middle, and we're going to glue it there to create the mold wall. That looks great. This is ready. Let's mix this up. This comes with a base and a catalyst. All right. You're supposed to use 2 ounces of this base for 1 measure of this. I don't think we need 2 of that in there. That's too much. I'm going to do 1 of these and half of these. But first, we gotta put some gloves on. All right. I'm gonna mix it in one of these because it fits a little bit better. And all right, so let's get this in there all the way. And half of this. See that? All right. Get that in there. This silicone cures in a few hours, so you have decent amount of time to mix it up. And mix it thoroughly. Scrape the sides. Okay, scrape your stir stick. And again, until you have it nice and consistent. Right now it's still separated, as you can see. And do it slowly so you don't introduce that many bubbles. We're doing a very simple process today that doesn't include any sort of degassing or pressure, like a pressure pot. We're just doing it straight out of the box with nothing special. So make sure it's mixed really well. All right. Get some of these bubbles out. Just tap it. See, there's some bubbles on the top. The trick now is just to pour it in a thin stream down the side of the mold. That looks awesome. So we're going to set this to cure, and the instructions say 2 to 4 hours. So I'll see you in 1 second. Now while that cures, here's another tip. We're going to be using a lot of these measuring cups, and usually a couple of them will come in here, but you can also get like 10 of them for like $1 at the dollar store, which I thought it was a good price until I used 10 in like 2 days. So then I went searching and found this. There are 500 of them for 13 bucks, and I put a link below. It's from Amazon, but 500 for 13 bucks. You can't beat that. They're kind of in the pennies for each one. While this guy cures, let's make the other mold. So this mold, for this mold we're going to use the, come on focus, we're going to use the bouncy ball without the flat end. So find the smoothest one, roundest one you can find. So we're going to use this one, and the first thing I'm going to do is take one of these little shot glasses and fill it up about halfway with clay, okay? I'm going to just push it in gently. Just make sure you seal the edges so that we don't have any silicone seeping around the edges. So see, that edge is not sealed yet, so we're going to push clay in there. We're going to take the ball and we're going to push it into the clay as much as you can. Okay, and now we're going to pack clay all around it about halfway up the bouncy ball. We're making some little snakes of clay, flatten them, put them around and push them in. Make sure to push the clay firmly against the bouncy ball. And make sure you use sulfur-free clay. This is just regular, like air drying clay, the cheap kind. I'll put a link below. Just make sure it has no sulfur because that will inhibit the curing of the silicone. Then you end up with a goopy mess that never cures. All right, this part is really important. Make sure that the clay meets the ball perfectly, that there are no gaps, and it's a nicely defined edge. If you need to use tools, you can, but your best tool is your fingers. Don't forget that. Now that looks great. Now, since this is going to be the surface of the eye, I am wiping it really clean. Nice and squeaky clean. That is nice. Look at that. Okay, so now we prepare another batch of silicone and we're going to pour it on top of that. So I'm using a 1 ounce silicone with a half measure of this thing, the catalyst, right? So half a measure. Moving on. Again, same thing, nothing fancy. Stir it real good. Scrape the sides. Scrape your stir stick once in a while. All right. Again, thin stream on the side of the mold. And we're going to set it to cure next to the other one, right? And that's pretty zoomed in. Right there. So that is the inside eye. That is the outside. Yuck. Outside eye. I'll see you in 4 hours. I let these guys cure overnight and they are solid. So let's demold this stuff. There's the mold. Now we gotta cut this out of here, right? So the trick, so that the mold seals back up, is to cut it in a zigzag all the way till we reach the ball. Then we can get into straighter lines. But right here, we're going to do a zigzag so it fits like that, right? So it doesn't move and it always locks up like the way it's supposed to. So I am going to cut these like that, right? Then we're going to go to the top of the ball. So not all the way down, just to about here. So after that we can just pop the ball out. All right, we reached the ball on that side. See the yellow right there? Now let's do this side. Same thing. Requires a little bit of wrestling, but once you get it, you ta-da! There we go. Got this mold. It looks super clean. There's a little piece of clay there, so I'll clean this up. This one, on the other hand, you just need to split like that. Let's peel this off carefully. And there is the perfect dome for the second mold. So we got our molds there. This one we won't need for a while, so set it aside. This one, we're going to put some resin in here. So let's do that now. Now for the resin, I'm using this guy. This is just white resin. And it's a 2-part resin. And these guys use the same amount of part A and part B. This stuff sets really quick, like in 15 minutes. So you have like 30-second working time. So stir like really fast, but without making too many bubbles, because we're not going to put this in a vacuum or anything like that, or in a pressure pot. So just remember that, mix it thoroughly, but try not to insert too many bubbles. Then we're going to pour it in here, and it's going to have an exothermic reaction, which means it's going to heat up quite a bit, and like I said, work fast. We don't need a ton of mix, so I'm going to use maybe just about right there. Now this is equal parts by volume. I'm not sure what the densities are. They look slightly different, but try to mix it as close as possible to half and half. Now we got this just because it's fun. I don't need it for anything, but check out the temperature of the resin right now. 72 degrees. Now they're ready to mix. I'll pour this one first. Oh, you know what I did? I forgot my gloves. I'll be back. Much better. All right, so we have part 1 here. Let's get for part 2, and like I said, mix really quickly. Put in the mold. Now I have a couple of rubber bands here to hold the mold nice and tight. Not too tight where it will deform the mold, right? It just needs to sit perfect, like that. Now, moment of truth. Mix this up. Like I said, this will set up in 15 minutes. It will turn white first, then clear again, and then white again. Don't forget to scrape the edges, the bottom, because this resin will be a little oily if it doesn't get mixed correctly. So that's heating up already. So first, let's pour this. I'm just pouring a really thin line so it fits, because it thickens pretty quickly. That looks pretty full there. Got the bubbles coming up. See that? Let's get those bubbles out. Right, let that sit, and there's some extra. Let's see. Oh, I'm gonna set that there. And this, let's see. Let's try it again now. See, 102 degrees. 111, so it heats up quite a bit, so please don't get this on yourself. Let the reaction take place on their own, not on your skin. That is 130 degrees, so as you can see, it is kicking in right now, and it thickens. See how thick it is? And this is a bonus tutorial for all of you. Take your resin and just let it spill. Just leave it there. Look at that, it's turning white. Now this is a gag that I always wanted to buy when I was little, but I couldn't find it, which was that thing that looks like you spilled something on the table. That's how it's made. As you can see, it's starting to turn white in the middle, and this resin tends to cure from the thickest areas first to the thinnest areas. So as you can see, the edges are still clear. So when the edges turn white, that's when it's done. I think this is done. So this guy will set aside, but you have now your little gag that you spilled, and you can put it on top of everything. Now let's open this. This is nice and set, still a little warm, but let's open it. All right, there is our eye blank. right? Has a little bit of flashing there, but all that can be trimmed off or sanded off. And we have a nice flat area. See that? Let me move this so you can see it. There. So next step is the crucial one, is to decorate this to look like an eye. So let's get started. All right, this is done. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply an iris. Now in the past, like in this prop right here, I used a paper iris that I cut out. But for this one, I've created this sheet full of irises. The link is below where you can download it. It's a PDF. And I'm using a trick from one of my favorite YouTubers ever. And if you haven't seen this guy, check him out in the link below. He's one of those people where after you watch the video, you feel like a better person, you feel more informed, more entertained, which is what I try to do with my channel. If you ever feel a little bit better, happier, more entertained, or more informed after watching one of my videos, then I feel like I've done my job. So this guy does the same, and he had this technique. And these irises are very carefully printed on the backside of label paper, right? So this are little address labels, right? So I'm going to peel all the labels off until you end up with this slick, super slippery stuff, right? The backing, and you're going to have this file, the PDF, print on that slick part. Now handle it carefully because the ink is just barely floating on top, because this paper is not sticky, it's super slick. And it will run, even if you just rub your finger, it'll come off. So handle this carefully. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this and transfer it onto this without having to cut out a piece of paper and without having the thickness of the paper on top. Instead, it'll be just the image transferred onto the eye. So take your irises and select the one that you want to use. So let me pick one real quick. I have selected this iris right here. So what we're going to do is using some sort of like clear drying glue. I'm using this stuff from the dollar store. A little drop right there. And we're going to put a tiny little coat over the flat area of the eye. Just a thin layer, right? But make sure you get a glue that dries clear, okay? Now carefully, because like I said, this ink is very, it will run. I'm going to place it and center it as good as you can. All right, that looks good right there, right? So I'm just going to set it face down like that to dry. And don't mess with it, let it dry. Give it about an hour to make sure that the glue has totally dried. Now carefully lift the paper. And voila, we have ourselves a nice eye. So I did another one here. There's a different style, so this will be more like a werewolf or whatever creature you want, and this one is a little bit more human. These guys look awesome, so thank you Crafsman for the tip. I know you didn't invent it, but you were the one sharing the information, so thank you. That worked great. There's no paper there, it's just the image transferred. So let's move on to the next step. We're going to do the veins. I'm going to be using this just to help me out, but you can hold it with pretty much anything if you want. I'm just going to hold it like that, and we are going to take a little piece of yarn. This is regular red, dark red yarn. Whatever the cheapest is you can find will work. And it will last forever, because this little piece right here will be enough to make like 10 eyes, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull all these fibers apart. For this step, I'm using one of these disposable brushes. And one thing I like to do is to take some of this glue, that kind. I like this one because it's clear and it's super sticky, which helps adhere the yarn. and we are going to just paint an area that you want. It's great. Let's put a little drop of this down here. It helps a bit. Now we're going to take a tiny little bit of yarn, and we're just going to apply it to the top. Just gently lay it on there, just like that, and paint it until it sticks. Alright, and then just continue doing that all around the eyeball. And you can use a ton or use a little bit. For a more realistic eye, just use a tiny little bit. I'm talking like almost like single pieces of yarn. One other thing I like to do is to take these and just give them a little bit of a curvature so they get more like bunched up, busted, you know, capillaries. So give it like a little gnarly angle like that. See, not all of them, just a few, kind of like a busted area. All right, that looks pretty cool. So you're gonna have some little pieces sticking out up here on the top. Just trim those with scissors, or you can glue them down. I like to cut it right at the edge of the iris, so they don't go over the iris, because the veins usually don't go over the iris unless there's something really wrong with your eyes. There you go, from the side. They're sticking out a little bit, doesn't matter, we'll fix that in a second. So let me do that on this one real quick, and then we'll move on to the next step. These two are fully decked out. This one I went really heavy to show you a different example, and this one pretty light. Alright, let this dry. This next step is entirely optional. I like it because it gives the eye more realism and more depth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a little bit of the pupil out with my hand drill. It would be better if I had a drill press, but I don't. So keep it as steady as possible. And we're drilling down only a couple millimeters. Alright, see that? There is a hole. And now we are going to just fill up the hole with black nail polish. Right, this is just from the dollar store. And just do this carefully, and it will look awesome because it'll add a whole new dimension to your eyes. So I'm taking a drop here with this toothpick and very carefully dropping it inside. Right, and then just move it around. Put another little bit. That looks great. Now this, let this dry all the way, right? Because otherwise it will ruin the eye. But the enamel will be hard, but it will shrink a little, which will give a concave look to the pupil. So it looks more realistic. So while this one dries, I'm going to do the same to this guy. Now check this eyeball right here. That looks pretty cool, right? But as you can see, the color of the cornea, which is the white area, is like really dark. So these guys are really white. So we need to replicate this. Now there's a little extreme, so I'll show you what I did. And the way that we get the color on the cornea is that I take some food coloring, but we're going to use a tiny little bit. I'm just barely putting a drop there and a drop there. Now the yellow one is for the realistic eye, right? And the red one is for the more monstrous eye. And just regular rubbing alcohol. This is 91% IPA or isopropyl alcohol. Now we're just going to put a ton there, right? Because we need is barely, and I mean like barely any of the color. So this yellow right here needs to be just barely yellow. And let's zoom in. I'm going to take the alcohol and we're going to dab the yellow, and if it's too yellow like that, just put more alcohol. And just barely start putting a little bit of it's kind of like a stain, if you will. I'm not painting it yellow, and I like painting it around where the veins are. That gives it a more realistic area, because where the veins are is where the capillaries are, and that is where this color would concentrate, right? So just add it, and like I said, less is more for the realistic one. If you're making like a fake monstrous eye, then go crazy. Here's the irritation here, a little bit right here. And this just takes that bright white color away. See this big piece of white color? This will kind of make it disappear, right? And as you see, I'm just barely dabbing it. I'm not rubbing it or anything. If you want to add red here, you can too, but like I said, be very careful, because as you can see, it's super strong. So you need to like make your own red dye over here away from it, so it's not too strong. And then just again dab a little strong piece right here. Look at that. That's looking good. And the more color you put, the less realistic it is. So that is going to be a very irritated eye, right? Now let's do it with this one. This one I'm going to go a little more crazy, so let's put more red. Get it nice and wet, and just start dabbing the red. This is supposed to be a monster eye, or an eye that had some serious trauma. And I want to leave a white ring around the iris, just so that the iris jumps out, so I'm not going too close to the iris. I'm just going where the eyeball is, over here. See that? And it just complements all the yarn, because it looks like all the capillaries are busted around it. See that? If it's too strong, use your finger, smooth it out a bit. I want this one, I want it strong, so let's keep going. See that? That looks like it hurts. All right, so we got two eyes. Let that dry, and we go to our next step. These guys are dry, so let's do, this is not the last step, but we're almost there. So I got this stuff from the store, as I mentioned before. This is the clear castable or casting resin, all right? So we're going to mix just a little bit like we did, and let me show you how we do it. This is also a two-part resin, right? A and B, and you use equal amounts. Now, wear your gloves, because these resins have a ton of warnings. So, skin irritant, corrosive, poison, all kinds of stuff. So wear your gloves. And also, while you were not looking, I made another mold with the bouncy balls, right? And it's just a plain old round mold. That's so I can make more than one eye at a time, right? I realized that when we started making more and more eyes. Right, let's mix this up. I'm just going to take this resin and put it in that one. So you get all of it, because when you use this tiny little amount, the volume changes a lot. We're going to mix this real well. Now this resin takes about 24 to 36 hours to cure, so no hurry here. You can really mix it up real good. Try to avoid the bubbles, especially since we're not, putting it in a pressure pot. But mix it real good, get the sides like we mentioned before. Now that we have all of it, put it in this red cup. Now that is all in there, just throw this away. And we have a clean cup and a clean mixer. So let's mix this real good. Now you won't have any uncured pieces. All right, that looks good. Now first thing I'm going to do is I'm using one of these disposable brushes. And I'm going to paint, just put some right on top of the eye, right? And that's to seal all that. Same on the other one. And paint the edges as well. What this does, it's going to stop some of the bubbles from being trapped when we put it in the mold. All right, so now we take the second mold we made right here, and we put I like to paint the inside of the mold again to avoid bubbles, and then put a little drop right there. That's what is going to make the little lens on that flat area. And I'm going to do the same on this guy right here that I also made earlier. Now this resin in particular smells really strong, so make sure you work in a well ventilated area, and if you don't have the luxury, then wear a respirator. Now this step is crucial to avoid the bubbles. We're going to put this in sideways so all the air bubbles come out the side like that. See how it's showing? And now I'm going to turn it and put it straight face down. Okay, I'm going to do the same with this little guy right here. And resin will come out the sides, but that is fine. It's supposed to be that way. All right, and the last step is take some of the resin and paint the back if you have some left. You're going to end up with a little edge right here of resin, but we can sand that off or cut it off when we demold this, guys. Now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this resin and put a drop there, a drop there, a drop there. Let me show you. See these little drops right here? And I'm putting about, you only need like 2 drops. I'm doing 4 here for demonstration purposes. Because the secret to these eyes is to set this aside and don't mess with it. Do not touch it. Don't check it. Don't look at it. Nothing. So I'm setting them over here in the back of the table where you cannot see them, and I won't mess with them. And we're going to let that cure. It's going to be about 24 hours to 36 hours. So we come back in 24 hours and we'll touch that little piece, that little drop. And if it's still sticky, don't mess with the mold, then wait another 6 hours, 8 hours, maybe another day, 24 hours, 36, come back and touch that one. And when you feel that the thing is solid and dry and fully cured, right? That way you don't mess with your mold. That way you're messing with these little guys right here. Then you go and demold them. So I'll see you in 24 to 36 hours when we will demold the eyes and see how they turned out. It has been 24 hours, so I'm testing on this one. It's pretty dry, but if I put my nail on it, it is leaving a mark, so it's still slightly soft. So I'm gonna go for a run and I'll test again tonight, see how we are. So I'm gonna remove this one and we'll test that one when we get back. All right, see you in a bit. Now while the resin cures, I wanted to tell you that this stuff, even though I only spent about 60 or 70 bucks, it is the patrons of my Patreon account that help me buy the stuff to keep this channel going. So if you're interested in becoming a Patreon patron, just hit the link below. That'll be awesome. It'll help me buy a coffee or buy more resin or buy different kinds of resin so we can do eyes that look even better. So thank you to all the Patreon patrons right here. It's been about 36 hours, so this is solid now. I cannot dig my nail into it, so we can unmold these guys. This part is always exciting and scary. All right, that's one of them. Check it out. See this flashing? You just remove that flashing. You can peel it off or cut it off. It is a little sticky, so you can let them rest, but check out the veins. They are perfectly flat, right? Do you see that? right there. It's perfectly smooth. So we're going to let this finish curing for another few hours. I'm gonna go to work, let these guys cure there, and let's get this one out. Oh, nice. Ah, there you go. Check it out. See that? It's nice. It's very smooth. I don't see a whole lot of bubbles. That's looking great. Look at the veins here as well. All right. I'm gonna let this cure, and I will see you in a little bit. These are fully cured now, so let's take this flashing off. And for that, with just a pair of scissors or something like this wire cutter, just take the excess off. That looks pretty cool. So now with a file, we can take this edge off. I'm going to mount the eye to this drill. There we go. And how it turns, just going to take the excess off. Not too much, because this is a very thin layer of resin. I'm just taking this hard edges right here. I'm also not filing anything on the front, just the back to get the edges nice and clean. So the final step is to polish this, right? So this one's pretty shiny and this one's not so shiny. So what I'm going to do is I have these guys right here. The sponges, which I got on Amazon with the link below. These are not that expensive, and they come with all kinds of grits, like 400, see there's 2500, 3000, 3500, right? 3000 and so on. So it goes to the whole range. And like I said, this stuff right here is super thin, so I'm not gonna go all the way from 400 to 3000 because you'll wear it out, and this is pretty smooth as it is, so I'm going to go straight to like the 3000. I'm just going to get this wet, put it on the drill, and very gently polish the surface. I have a little bowl of water and my 3500 sponge. Let's get it nice and wet. All right, and gently polish. Just very gently go up and down. You will feel how it gets super smooth, right? That is looking great. So now for the final step, we're going to get a polishing compound, which you can use car wax or a specialty polishing compound. I'm going to use some blue plastic polishing compound, which I will show you in the next shot. For this next step, we're going to use the Dremel tool, but you can also use like a bench, you know, like a tabletop buffer, which I will show you in another shot right here. But we're using, it's called polishing blue compound. Just make sure that whatever compound you use is good for plastic, okay? It's good for plastic and soft metals. If you use some of the other colors, like the black one, the silver, or the white, those are designed for hard metals, and they're really aggressive and they'll eat up your eye in no time. So the way we use this is like this. All right, so I am loading some compound onto the buffing wheel. And you'll see the wheel turn a little bit blue, right? See the edges as you load it. All right, now we're going to very gently take the eye and start buffing the eye. See, it starts getting shinier, getting some shine. So just be patient with this, be very gentle with it too, because you don't want to eat through that thin layer of clear resin. So let me show you on the tabletop buffer. Check these out, these are looking nice and shiny. Let me put a close-up on it. Now that is very, very nice. Now if you want it shinier than that, the other trick is grab yourself some car wax, any kind, as long as it's like the finishing wax. And then take your finger, your sponge, or here's a piece of a paper towel. And we're just going to rub some of this in. Right, Rub it. Then set it aside, let that dry. Let's do the same to this one. Now once these guys are dry, all you have to do is very gently polish them some more. And just, again, very gently start polishing. Alright, that's like a glass-like finish right there. That's how you make the realistic eyes. Now what you do with these, it's up to you. I want you to let me know below in the comments what you're going to do with the eyes. But one of the things you can do is I tapped the back with one of these cheap tools. I used a 1/4 inch tap so that you can take a screw, put it in there in case you want to mount the eye inside of a head, or if you want to make some sort of animatronic, right? You can do that. You can also do like a half an eye. And these little pieces where the spouts were, where the sprue was, you can cut them off. Or you can use it like if you saw, it can go on the drill to help you polish it, to help you hold it. If you put it in a, like in a foam head or in a prop, that'll help you hold it. It's up to you. Cut it, put a screw. It's up to you. So let me know below what you're going to do with the eyes. Now these are not quite prosthetic quality, but I think they turned out fantastic, right? I think so. So anyway, that's that. So if you like this tutorial, this project, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. And I will see you on the next tutorial. See you, Prop Mob.